Well, hey, Life Groups. We've got a great conversation today that is anchored in the text that we looked at on Sunday in Acts chapter 6, knowing that this is kind of the last of this first section of the book of Acts that we've called the making of a movement, where time and time again, Luke, or God through Luke, has provided us some early lessons from the first century church that can apply to our lives personally and to our church family today. And so recall the story and the narrative tension when the apostles found themselves with this problem of the Hellenistic Jewish widows being ignored in the food distribution program that was led by the Hebraic Jewish people. There was kind of an inequality and almost an injustice there. And for them to embrace that and to solve that themselves, which at the time was their job, it was going to require them neglecting their preaching duties and the study and the preparation and kind of their primary calling of communicating the message of Jesus. But faced with that either or and that presumable lose-lose, they had an idea and tried to employ a both and that led to a win-win. And they devoted themselves to focusing on the message of Jesus while they empowered and entrusted others to deliver this food distribution program. And it not only pleased everyone among the whole church, but it actually resulted in more growth, more unity, and more momentum than they'd ever experienced before. So you can go back and study the text if you want, or comb through the video message if you want to get into it in more detail. But it really begs the question today of how the movement of God is going in our day and age and in our lives personally and in our church, knowing that the movement of God is a combination of two things: the message of Jesus and his mission of justice. In the message on Sunday, I compared it to like breathing and inhaling and exhaling, or better, the input of diet and the output of exercise. And so as life groups, I'd really encourage you to consider those two questions that we considered, to ask, how the diet of input looks like in your life and what you're doing these days to absorb the message of Jesus in fuller and deeper ways yourself, and at the same time, to assess what the medium that is the message of love in that output of compassion and justice looks like in your life as well. Are you engaged in the anchor cause of your particular location? Do you know marginalized people? Are you in ongoing active friendships with people who are on the fringes, at work, at school, in your neighborhood, friends or family members that you might know who are suffering, struggling, or find themselves on the outs? And in what way can you, through befriending and living out the love of Jesus, advocate for them in a way that equalizes and includes them, which is the heart of what justice is all about? I want us to appreciate that it's not an either or. It's not either input or output, one or the other, that leads to a lose-lose. Today, like 2,000 years ago in the first century church, like in the life of Jesus, who ultimately declared and modeled this himself, quoting Old Testament prophecies that God had intended all along, God's heart has always been to unleash movements of his Spirit in and among us. But it happens through embracing that both and, of both the message of Jesus and his mission of justice. So I encourage you to process how you're living out and experiencing that both and, both in your personal lives and maybe as a life group or together as a church family among us today. Wish you a great discussion and blessings as you study Acts chapter 6.